Temperance Wade hit the hitching post hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. The man in the torn duster lunged again, fingers clawing for her wrist. She twisted, but her heel caught in the hem of her skirt. Then a shadow cut between them, solid as a wall. The stranger in the tan coat caught the attacker's arm mid-grab and drove him sideways into the dirt with brutal efficiency. Temperance straightened, heart hammering, and met the stranger's eyes for the first time. Dark, sharp, calculating. The kind of eyes that measured threats before most men saw them coming. He held the attacker down, with one knee, not even breathing hard. "You all right?" he said, without looking away from the man beneath him. She nodded, though her pulse still roared in her ears. The attacker spat dust and scrambled to his feet the moment the stranger released him, vanishing into the alley between the mercantile and the land office. The stranger rose, brushing dirt from his coat, and finally turned to face her fully. Temperance smoothed her shawl with shaking hands. "Thank you," she said. "That's the second time this week someone's tried to grab me off the street." His jaw tightened. "Second time." She nodded. "I sing at the Red Spur Saloon. Some men think that means I'm for sale." His gaze flicked past her toward the saloon, then back. "You armed?" It wasn't a question. She hesitated, then shook her head. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small revolver, holding it out grip first. "Keep it on you. Don't pull it unless you mean to use it." She stared at the gun, then at him. "I don't even know your name." "Eamon Pruitt. I train horses at Red Mesa Ranch, just outside town. And you're Temperance Wade." Everyone in Broken Ridge knows the girl with the voice. Heat climbed her cheeks. She took the revolver, the weight of it unfamiliar and cold. "Why would you give me this?" "Because the third time, I might not be here." He tipped his hat, a gesture so brief it barely registered, and turned toward the livery. Temperance watched him go, the revolver hidden in the folds of her shawl. She'd been in Broken Ridge for 8 months, saving every dollar she earned to buy passage east, away from the accusation that had followed her from Kansas, away from the memory of her father's face when the marshal called her a thief in front of the whole town. She'd promised herself she'd never stay anywhere long enough to be cornered again. But now, a stranger had handed her a weapon and walked away without asking for anything in return. That kind of kindness was dangerous. It made a person want to stay. That night, Temperance stood on the low platform at the back of the Red Spur and sang a ballad about a girl who left her home and never looked back. The crowd was rowdy, but they quieted when she reached the chorus. She closed her eyes and let the melody carry the weight she couldn't say out loud. When she opened them again, Eamon Pruitt stood at the bar, hat in hand, watching her. Not like the other men watched. No hunger, no possession, just steady attention, as if he were trying to figure out a puzzle. She finished the song and stepped down, weaving through tables toward the bar. He didn't look away. "You followed me," she said. He shook his head. "I came for a drink. Came to the only saloon in town where someone tried to kidnap you 6 hours ago." He almost smiled. Seemed like the safest place. "You'd be on guard." She crossed her arms. "You're not like the other ranch hands. They come in loud, looking for a fight or a girl. You come in quiet, looking for something else. What is it you want, Mr. Pruitt?" He set his hat on the bar. "I want to know why someone's trying to take you. And I want to know why you're planning to leave." She froze. How do you know that? He nodded toward her reticule, tucked under her shawl. You carry everything you own in that bag. You don't rent a room. You sleep in the storage loft behind the stage. And you watch the train schedule like it's a holy text. People who live somewhere don't do that. People running do. Temperance felt the walls close in. She'd been so careful. I'm not running, she said. I'm leaving. There's a difference. He studied her. What happened in Kansas? Her breath caught. You don't know anything about Kansas. I know Marshal Cade's been asking questions about you. I know he got a wire 2 days ago from a marshal in Abilene. And I know you've been singing here for 8 months without spending a dime you don't have to. That's someone building an escape fund. She turned away, but he caught her wrist, gentle but firm. I'm not here to turn you in. I'm here because someone in this town wants you gone, and they're not being subtle about it. You need help whether you want it or not. She yanked her hand free. And what do you get out of it? His eyes darkened. Maybe I'm tired of watching people get pushed around by men with badges and guns. She wanted to believe him. That was the problem. She'd spent 2 years learning that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. But Eamon Pruitt didn't look like a man who lied for sport. He looked like a man who'd been pushed around himself and learned to push back. 3 days later, Temperance stood on the train platform with her carpet bag in hand and a one-way ticket to Denver in her pocket. The morning train hissed and clanked, ready to pull out. She'd made it. 1 more minute, and she'd be gone. Then, Eamon Pruitt stepped onto the platform, breathing hard, dust on his coat like he'd ridden straight through the night. Don't get on that train, he said. She tightened her grip on the bag. You don't get to tell me what to do. Marshal Cade's planning to arrest you the minute you step off in Denver. He wired ahead. If you run, you prove you're guilty. Her stomach dropped. How do you know that? Because I broke into his office last night and read the wire. She stared at him. You did what? He moved closer, lowering his voice. There's a rumor going around town that you and I are involved. Cade's using it to pressure you into staying so he can hand you over to the marshal in Abilene. There's a bounty. Small, but enough to make him look good. She felt the world tilt. I never stole anything. I know. But running makes you look guilty, and staying makes you a sitting target. So what do I do? He hesitated, and in that pause she saw something flicker across his face. Fear, maybe, or calculation. We get engaged. Publicly. Today. She almost laughed. That's insane. It's cover. If we're courting, the rumor becomes truth and loses its power. Cade can't use it against you. And if you're tied to me, he'll have to go through Red Mesa Ranch to get to you. My bosses pull in this county. Cade won't move without proof. It buys you time to clear your name. Temperance looked at the train, then back at him. You're asking me to stay in the one place I swore I'd never stay. To tie myself to a man I barely know. To trust that you won't turn on me the second it's convenient. He met her eyes. Yes. The train whistle screamed. She had 10 seconds to decide. She thought of her father, who'd believed the marshal over his own daughter. She thought of the 8 months she'd spent invisible, untouchable, safe in her plan to disappear. And she thought of Eamon Pruitt handing her a revolver without asking for payment. She stepped off the platform. The train pulled away behind her, and she didn't look back. Red Mesa Ranch sat 3 miles west of Broken Ridge, a sprawling operation with good water and better horses. The owner, a gray-haired man named Orson Ballard, took one look at Temperance and nodded. "You can stay in the guest cabin. Eamon says you sing. I says you work. You'll earn your keep helping my wife with the house and the books." "Understood." Temperance nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Ballard." He grunted and walked off toward the barn. Eamon led her to a small cabin near the main house. One room with a stove, a bed, and a window that looked out over the hills. "It's not much," he said. "It's mine," she said. "That makes it everything." He lingered in the doorway. "We'll ride into town tomorrow. Make the engagement public. Let people see us together. You'll need a ring." She turned. "I can't afford a ring." He pulled a thin gold band from his pocket, old and worn smooth. "It was my mother's. She died when I was 12. I've carried it since." She stared at it. "I can't take that." "You're not taking it. I'm lending it. When this is over and you're clear, you give it back and go wherever you want. No strings." She took the ring, the metal warm from his hand. "Why are you doing this?" He looked past her, out the window. "Because 3 years ago, I was accused of stealing horses from a ranch in Wyoming. I didn't do it, but the owner had money, and I had nothing. I ran. Spent 2 years drifting, taking work where I could, always looking over my shoulder. When I finally stopped running, I realized I'd lost more than my reputation. I'd lost the chance to build anything real. I don't want that for you." Temperance slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit. "We're doing this to survive," she said. "Not because we're in love." He nodded. Understood. But even as he said it, she wondered if survival and love were really as separate as she wanted them to be. They rode into Broken Ridge the next morning, side by side, and the town noticed. Eamon tied their horses outside the general store and offered Temperance his arm. She took it, feeling every eye on them. Inside, he bought fabric for a new dress, paid in cash, and made sure the clerk saw the ring on her finger. "Word'll be all over town by noon," he murmured as they stepped back into the street. "That's the idea," she said. But her pulse was racing. This wasn't just a performance. This was a claim, a line drawn in the dirt. They walked to the land office next, where Eamon filed a notice of intent to purchase a small parcel on the edge of his employer's property. The clerk, a nervous man with ink-stained fingers, looked between them. "You two setting up house?" Eamon nodded. "Come spring." Temperance kept her face calm, but inside she felt the trap tighten. She'd agreed to this. She'd stepped off the train. But every public declaration made it harder to imagine leaving. They ate lunch at the hotel restaurant, and Marshal Cade walked in halfway through the meal. He was a tall man with a thin mustache and eyes like a snake. He stopped at their table. "Heard some interesting news, Pruitt. You and Miss Wade." Eamon didn't look up from his plate. "That's right." Cade smiled. "Funny. Last week she was planning to leave town. This week she's planning a wedding. People change their minds." Cade leaned closer. "Or people get desperate. I've been hearing things, Miss Wade. Things about Abilene. about a payroll that went missing. Temperance forced herself to meet his gaze. I didn't take any payroll. Then you won't mind if I wire Abilene and ask for details. Eamon set down his fork. You do that, Marshall. And while you're at it, explain why you've been trying to run her out of town before she has a chance to defend herself. Cade's smile vanished. Careful, Pruitt. I don't take kindly to accusations. Neither do I, Eamon said. So we understand each other. Cade straightened, tipped his hat to Temperance with exaggerated courtesy, and walked out. Temperance exhaled slowly. He's going to come after us. Eamon nodded. Let him. We've got time to build a case. And I've got friends. That night, back at the ranch, Temperance sat on the porch of her cabin and watched the stars come out. Eamon emerged from the barn and crossed the yard, carrying a lantern. Mind if I sit? He asked. She shook her head. He settled beside her on the step, close enough that she could feel the warmth from his shoulder. You handled Cade well today, he said. I've had practice lying to men with badges. He glanced at her. You want to tell me what really happened in Abilene? She pulled her shawl tighter. I worked as a clerk in a freight office. My father was the manager. One morning, the payroll was gone. $300. The marshal questioned everyone, and someone said they saw me near the safe the night before. I had been there. I was working late, finishing the books. But I didn't take the money. The marshal didn't believe me. My father, she paused, her throat tight. My father didn't believe me either. He said I must have taken it to run off with some man. He was already ashamed of me for singing in public, for refusing to marry the man he'd chosen. The payroll was just the excuse he needed to cut me loose. So I left. I've been moving ever since, working saloons, saving money, trying to get far enough away that the accusation wouldn't follow. Eamon was quiet for a long moment. You think your father took the money? She blinked. What? He wanted you gone. You said so yourself. What better way than to make you look guilty? She'd never let herself think it. The idea was too cruel. But now, hearing it spoken aloud, it made a terrible kind of sense. I don't know, she whispered. Maybe. Or maybe it was someone else, and I'll never know the truth. He turned to face her. You deserve to know. And you deserve to stop running. She met his eyes, and for the first time since Kansas, she let herself feel the weight of hope. Maybe you're right. Maybe I do. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Temperance helped Mrs. Ballard with the household accounts and learned to bake bread in the big ranch kitchen. Eamon worked the horses, breaking colts and training mares, his hands always scraped and his shoulders always tight. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch and talked. He told her about Wyoming, about the ranch owner who'd accused him, and the 2 years he'd spent drifting. She told him about her mother, who died when Temperance was young, and the songs her mother used to sing. Slowly, carefully, they built something neither of them had planned on. Trust. And beneath it, something warmer. Dangerous. One evening, Eamon came back from town with news. Orson's lawyer looked into the Abilene case. Turns out the marshal who accused you never filed a formal report. No warrant, no charges, nothing. It was all rumor. Temperance felt the air leave her lungs. So, I'm not actually wanted. You never were. Cade's been bluffing this whole time. Relief crashed over her, but it was tangled with anger. Why would he do that? Eamon sat beside her. Because someone paid him to run you out of town. And I think I know who. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. I found this in the saloon. It's a land deed transfer. The Red Spur Saloon was sold 3 weeks ago to a man named Victor Lang. He's a cattle buyer from Denver, but he's got a reputation. He buys up properties in small towns, pushes out anyone who might complicate the sale, and flips them for profit. If you left, the saloon owner would have had no choice but to sell cheap. Temperance stared at the paper. So this whole thing, the kidnapping attempts, the rumors, Cade's threats, it was all to force me out so Lang could buy the saloon. Eamon nodded. And now that we're engaged, and you're staying, Lang's losing leverage. That makes us a problem. She looked up at him. What do? We go public. We prove you're not a thief, we expose Cade's bluff, and we make sure Lang knows he picked the wrong town to run his game. But we have to move fast. I heard Lang's bringing in hired guns, outlaw hunters, men who don't care about the truth, just the paycheck. Her chest tightened. When? Tomorrow. The next morning, 3 men rode into Broken Ridge. They wore long coats and low hats, and they carried rifles across their saddles. Eamon spotted them from the ranch and rode hard into town, Temperance behind him. By the time they arrived, the men were standing outside the Red Spur, talking to Marshal Cade. Eamon dismounted and pulled Temperance close. Stay behind me. She shook her head. This is my fight. It's our fight, he said. And I'm not letting you face it alone. They crossed the street together. Cade saw them coming and smiled. Mr. Pruitt. Miss Wade. I'd like you to meet some associates of mine. This is Rafe Coltrane and his brothers. They're bounty hunters. Here to collect a fugitive. Temperance stepped forward. I'm not a fugitive. There's no warrant, no charges, no case. You've been lying to this town for weeks, Marshal. Cade's smile faltered. Rafe Coltrane, a broad man with a scar across his jaw, spat into the dirt. Don't matter if there's a warrant. We were hired to bring you in. Someone wants you gone. Eamon moved between them. You're not taking her. Rafe's hand drifted toward his rifle. You planning to stop us, horse trainer? The street went silent. Townspeople stopped in doorways, watching. Temperance felt the weight of Eamon's revolver, still tucked in her shawl. She pulled it out slowly, aimed it at Cade. This stops now, she said. Her voice carried across the square. I didn't steal anything in Abilene. I didn't run because I was guilty. I ran because men like you made it impossible to stay. But I'm done running. If you want me, you'll have to drag me, and I'll make sure everyone in this county knows you're doing it on Victor Lang's payroll. Cade's face went white. You can't prove that. Eamon pulled the land deed from his coat and held it up. I can. Lang bought the saloon and paid you to clear out anyone who'd make trouble. You threatened her, you spread rumors, and you brought in hired guns. That's conspiracy and extortion, Marshal. How do you think the county judge is going to feel about that? The crowd murmured. Cade's authority was cracking in real time. Rafe Coltrane looked between them, then at Cade. We don't work for free, Marshal. If this job's dirty, we're out. He and his brothers mounted up and rode off without another word. Cade stood alone in the street, his badge catching the sun. You're making a mistake, he said. Temperance lowered the gun. No, I'm making a choice. She turned to the crowd. I'm staying in Broken Ridge. I'm going to keep singing at the Red Spur, and I'm going to marry Eamon Pruitt come spring. If anyone has a problem with that, say it now. No one spoke. Slowly, the townspeople nodded. A woman Temperance recognized from the mercantile stepped forward. We're glad you're staying, dear. This town needs more people willing to stand up. Cade turned and walked toward the marshal's office, his shoulders stiff. Temperance knew he'd leave town by nightfall. Men like him always did. That night, Eamon and Temperance sat together in the ranch house parlor. Orson Ballard poured them each a glass of whiskey and raised his own. To standing your ground, he said. They drank. Mrs. Ballard, a sturdy woman with kind eyes, patted Temperance's hand. You've got spine, girl. This ranch is lucky to have you. Temperance smiled, but inside she felt the weight of what she'd done. She'd stopped running. She'd chosen to stay. And now, she had to figure out what that meant. Later, as she and Eamon walked back toward her cabin, he stopped under the cottonwood tree near the barn. You know you don't have to marry me, he said. We did what we set out to do. You're safe. Cade's gone. Lang's got no leverage. You can leave if you want. She looked at him, at the way the moonlight caught the sharp line of his jaw, the way his hands hung loose at his sides like he was bracing for a blow. Do you want me to leave? She asked. He hesitated. No. Then why are you saying I can? Because I don't want you to stay out of obligation. I want you to stay because you choose to. She stepped closer. I got off that train because I was afraid. I stayed because you made me feel like I could fight back. But now, she took a breath. Now I'm staying because I want to. Because when I think about building a home, I think about building it with you. He reached up and touched her face, his hand rough and warm. I've been alone a long time, Temperance. I'm not good at this. She smiled. Neither am I, so we'll figure it out together. He kissed her then, slow and careful, and she felt the last of her walls come down. This wasn't survival. This was choice. This was love. Winter came slow to Broken Ridge. Temperance kept singing at the Red Spur 3 nights a week, and the crowds grew. She and Eamon spent their free hours building furniture for the cabin, planning the small house they'd raise on the land Eamon had filed for. Orson Ballard offered Eamon a partnership in the ranch, and Eamon accepted. For the first time in his life, he had a stake in something that couldn't be taken away. Temperance wrote to the marshal in Abilene, explaining what had happened and asking for the truth. 6 weeks later, a reply came. The real thief had been caught, a clerk who'd confessed and returned the money. Her name was cleared. She read the letter aloud to Eamon on the porch, her hands shaking. It's over, she said. He pulled her close. No, it's just starting. She believed him. Christmas came, and Mrs. Ballard insisted they join the family for dinner. Temperance sang carols by the fire, and Eamon sat beside her, his hand resting on hers. She looked around the room, at the people who'd become her family, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. In February, Eamon asked her again, properly this time, kneeling in the snow outside the half-built house. Temperance weighed. Will you marry me? Not because we have to. Because I love you. She pulled him to his feet, laughing and crying at once. Yes, Yes, I'll marry you. Spring arrived with wildflowers and warm wind. The house was finished, small but sturdy, with a porch that faced the hills. Temperance moved her few belongings from the cabin, and Eamon brought his mother's quilt from the bunkhouse. On a Saturday morning in late April, they were married in the Broken Ridge Church. Mrs. Ballard cried. Orson stood as witness. The whole town turned out, and when Eamon kissed his bride, the crowd cheered. Temperance wore a new dress, pale green cotton with lace at the collar, and she carried wildflowers. Eamon wore his best coat, brushed clean, and his mother's ring stayed on Temperance's finger. After the ceremony, they walked back to the ranch together, hand in hand. The sun was high, and the air smelled like sage. "You ever regret getting off that train?" he asked. She smiled. "Not once." "Good, because I'd have chased it down and dragged you off myself." She laughed. "No, you wouldn't." He grinned. "You're right. I'd have bought a ticket and convinced you over 3 states. That's more your style." They reached the house and stopped on the porch. Temperance looked out at the land, at the horses grazing in the distance, at the life they'd built from nothing but stubborn hope. "This is home," she said. Eamon wrapped his arm around her. "Yeah, it is." And for the first time in her life, Temperance Wade believed she'd never have to run again. That evening, the Red Spur hosted a celebration. The owner, grateful that Temperance had helped drive off Victor Lang's scheme, gave her a permanent contract with a raise. She sang 3 songs, and the crowd sang along. Eamon stood at the back, watching her with a look that made her heart skip. When she finished, he walked up to the platform and offered his hand. "Dance with me." She took it, and he led her to the small, clear space near the bar. Someone played a slow waltz on the piano, and they moved together, close and easy. "You're a terrible dancer," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but you make me look good." She rested her head on his shoulder. "We did it. We actually did it." He kissed the top of her head. "We did." Later, as they rode back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, Temperance thought about the girl who'd stepped off that platform 8 months ago, terrified and alone. She'd been so sure that staying meant getting trapped. But staying had given her everything she'd been running from. A name, a home, a love worth fighting for. Eamon reined in his horse at the top of the hill and looked back at her. "You all right?" She smiled. "Better than all right." He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. "Good, because I plan on keeping you around for a long time." She squeezed his hand. "I'm not going anywhere." And she meant it. The seasons turned. Summer brought cattle drives and long days in the saddle. Eamon and Orson drove a herd to market in Cheyenne, and Temperance managed the ranch books while they were gone. She discovered she had a head for numbers and a talent for negotiation. When the men returned, Orson offered her a formal position as ranch accountant. She accepted. In the fall, Temperance found out she was pregnant. She told Eamon on a cool October evening as they sat on the porch of their house, watching the sunset. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just stared at her with wide eyes. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe. "We're going to have a family," he said, his voice rough. She nodded against his chest. "We are." He pulled back and looked at her, his face serious. "I'm going to be a good father. I'm going to make sure our kids never have to run." She believed him. That winter, they added a second room to the house. Mrs. Ballard helped Temperance sew tiny blankets and gowns. Eamon carved a cradle from cottonwood, sanding it smooth and rubbing it with oil until it gleamed. In March, their daughter was born, a squalling, red-faced girl with a full head of dark hair. They named her Clara, after Eamon's mother. Temperance held her and felt the last piece of her old life fall away. She wasn't running anymore. She was building, and it was better than anything she'd imagined. Years passed. Clara grew into a bright, fearless child who loved horses as much as her father. Temperance kept singing, though less often now, and only at town gatherings. She preferred the quiet of the ranch, the rhythm of seasons, the slow, steady growth of the life she and Eamon had built. They added 2 more rooms to the house. They bought more land. They hired hands and taught them to train horses the way Eamon had learned, with patience and respect. Red Mesa Ranch became known across the territory for producing the best working horses in the region. Orson Ballard retired and left the ranch to Eamon and Temperance, making them full partners. It was more than Temperance had ever dreamed possible. One evening, when Clara was 5, Temperance found Eamon standing on the porch, looking out at the hills. She joined him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He smiled. "I'm thinking about the day you got off that train. The day you chose to stay." She leaned against him. "Best decision I ever made." He kissed her temple. "Mine too." They stood together in the fading light, watching their daughter chase chickens in the yard, and Temperance felt the full weight of her contentment. She'd spent so long running that she'd forgotten what it felt like to arrive. But here, with Eamon's hand in hers and the ranch spreading out before them, she knew she'd finally found it. Home wasn't a place you ran to. It was a place you built, one choice at a time, with someone you trusted to build it alongside you. On Clara's 6th birthday, the town held a spring festival. Temperance sang on the platform in the town square, the same place she'd once held a gun on Marshall Cade. Eamon stood at the edge of the crowd with Clara on his shoulders, both of them watching her with matching grins. When she finished, the crowd applauded, and Clara ran to her, throwing her arms around Temperance's waist. "You're the best singer in the whole world, Mama." Temperance laughed and picked her up. "And you're the best daughter." They walked through the festival together, the 3 of them, stopping at booths and greeting neighbors. Broken Ridge had become more than a town. It was a community, and Temperance was part of it. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Eamon pulled Temperance aside. "I have something for you." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small wooden box. She opened it and found a silver locket inside, engraved with her initials. "When did you get this?" "Last time I was in Cheyenne. I saw it and thought of you." She opened the locket and found 2 tiny photographs, one of Eamon, one of Clara. "It's perfect," she whispered. He fastened it around her neck. "You gave me a life, Temperance. I wanted to give you something that would remind you how much it means." She kissed him, long and slow, and didn't care who saw. That night, as they rode back to the ranch with Clara asleep between them, Temperance touched the locket and smiled. She'd come to Broken Ridge with nothing but a carpetbag and a plan to disappear. She was leaving the festival with a family, a home, and a love that had been earned through fire. Some stories ended with a kiss. This one ended with a life. Temperance Wade had spent her whole life running from the accusation that had branded her a thief. She'd believed that safety meant invisibility, that survival meant never staying long enough to be hurt. But Eamon Pruitt had taught her something different. He'd taught her that standing still could be braver than running, that trust, once earned, could be the foundation of everything. That home wasn't a place you were born into. It was a place you fought for and built with your own hands. She'd gotten off that train 8 months pregnant with fear, and she'd stayed because a stranger had handed her a gun and walked away without asking for payment. That one act of kindness had changed the trajectory of her entire life. And now, years later, as she stood on the porch of the house they'd built together, watching the sun rise over Red Mesa Ranch, she understood what freedom really meant. It wasn't the ability to leave. It was the courage to stay. Eamon joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand, and passed her one. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied. They stood in comfortable silence, sipping their coffee, watching the horses move through the pasture. Clara would wake soon, and the day would begin, full of chores and plans, and the small, steady joys of a life well lived. Temperance reached for Eamon's hand, and he took it without looking, the gesture as natural as breathing. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not letting me get on that train." He smiled. "Best decision I ever made." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Mine too."